call. I mean, we wanted to be able to celebrate a little bit because it has been 1 year since the 2019 regional elections, where we did get parties to support our call for regional voting rights, and the parties of the current Brussels government supported that resolution and have said that they want to further implement that resolution to increase the democratic participation of non-Belgians through voting and through other means. But we also realized that a lot of us are now really focusing our work on what's burning and most difficult for Brussels, which is COVID and the lockdown. Brussels has had to survive through a lot in its history. I just pulled this off of my wall. It's called Brussels Besieged, and it's Louis XIV destroying the Grand Place. But, you know, Brussels continues to survive, and, you know, eventually they built my house somewhere around here. So I'm sure that what we've gone through and are going through is going to become part of the history of Brussels. And we wanted to know what different types of initiatives involving non-Belgians are taking up your time right now, because many people who are actively fighting for the Brussels region to reach out to non-Belgians have been doing a lot of work here, at the EU level, in their home countries. So we wanted to check in because a lot of you have been doing great initiatives, and we don't know how many of you know about those initiatives. So it's a chance to share. We've asked who wants to speak, and after that, I'll also allow people to have 1 or 2 minutes for exchange. And then we wanted to get a bigger picture about how this lockdown, the costs, the social exclusion in Brussels are going to affect the city in the future. And so we asked Philippe van Parijs to share his reflections. He's published a little bit about this in the media, and he's been a supporter of 1bru1vote from the beginning. So how does he see this changing our strategy? And then we wanted to ask Bertrand Vert, who is really the big founding member, what he's been seeing as an Excel city councillor, and what he sees are maybe some of the opportunities, challenges, frustrations that he has now with getting non-Belgians active and heard today. And then this whole call is being organized through the impulse of Omri, who's been bringing the team back together to say, okay, well, in these next few years, with the government that we have in Brussels, what can we try to achieve? And he wanted to get your feedback on a strategy that he's put in place. So that's the purpose of the call. My job is to be tough love and to say, really, this is a moment for you to just reconnect, remind people what you're doing, but you don't need to give a whole presentation. People can go after this and go to your website, but we wanted you to really just have a moment to reconnect. So we asked some of you already to speak. And I mean, I can start because I was on the list and show you how to be brief. So the Migration Policy Group, where I'm the research director, is one of the main experts on immigrant integration across Europe. And we've been starting to monitor COVID information for immigrants because migrant health policy is a big weakness in integration policies in most countries. And also start to monitor the effects that this lockdown are going to have on immigrant business, immigrant education, immigrant organization. And so if you go to our website, that's where you can see a lot of what we're monitoring. And there's going to be a huge amount of social exclusion that is experienced by immigrants economically, educationally. Many immigrant organizations are really going to struggle, and we are not that different from them. So a lot of my work has really been at the European level. I actually haven't had any discussion or outreach with the Brussels region or the Brussels communes or Belgian authorities. I'd love to try and connect more with them. So that's my brief little spiel. Maybe next we can go to Sarah, editor-in-chief of the Bulletin, because we were asking also, you know, what they've been producing as content for their international audience. What are some of the challenges that they're seeing for initiatives? Are there good initiatives? Are there also, you know, challenges for an organization like the Bulletin? So Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. The immediate challenge was how to report on it. And we very quickly took the idea of just doing updates. The idea was really doing precise, accurate information in one document with regular updates. But then very clearly, we also wanted to be covering things other than Corona, which was actually quite difficult. So we went really for positive news stories as well. And particularly included a lot of fundraising initiatives. I'm having trouble, I've got an echo there. We noticed that there are a lot of people within the international community who were getting involved, whether it was from organising donations of PPE, to raising money, to organising meals for healthcare. And then we also wanted to go a little bit behind the scenes to actually, well, want to encourage volunteers to show people how they could get involved in their local communities, and also sometime interviewing Belgians as well and people on the front line and how people were going about their everyday jobs. We've had a massive increase in readers, but we've had a massive drop in revenue, of course, because our normal print magazines are not getting advertising revenue. And so this is a big challenge going ahead, is be able to do what we want to do, what we think is a real need, but finding some way of finding some revenue sources for our company as well. And then on the personal side, I'm a mental health campaigner, and this has been a particularly difficult time, but we've also been using it because there's been so much focus on mental health, because a lot more people have been having maybe issues and anxiety for the first time in their lives. So we're trying to use it to spotlight and focus the mental health issues. And there's a lot of concern about how deconfinement is going to, what the challenges are of that. So that's
is this campaign that you're doing here in Belgium on mental health?
Yes. Mental health is here in Belgium, yes. On two levels, one on a local level, on the Francophone side in Belgium, but then also, like Rosina, we're involved in mental health. We're both members of Mental Health Europe. So there's been an awareness week, and I'm on a communication task force for Mental Health Europe. So there's a European angle as well. So it's working on lots of different levels, local, national, and international.
Yeah.
This is really just the beginning. We really need to keep mental health on the agenda as well. And of course, that goes into, it also touches on migrants, it touches on homelessness, it touches on lots of areas.
Okay, maybe now I can then, so if you have other initiatives you want to share, Sarah, like share it in the chat box, or any other articles also from the bulletin, let us know. But actually, you give us a really good segue to Rosina, because she wants to talk not just about 100, but also about her work on mental health. Rosina?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. And yes, Sarah, indeed, it's a real epidemic. It already was mental health. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of things, and that was Women 100, and of course, women in mental health, but also youth. And so it's been very interesting. If I start off with the mental health and the youth aspect, because I have a son with mental health challenges, and in fact this confinement was of 9 weeks, incredibly challenging. Also for the schooling aspect, because there was absolutely not much support at all on the psychological level for my son, and in fact it really showcased to me where those breakdowns are, and how even although my son is thankfully he's a lot, how can I say, calmer than he was a few years ago, but we still had some violence and aggression incidents, which in fact resulted in me with having on Mother's Day a blue eye. In fact, so it was quite intense, I have to say, and I actually shared this in some of the women's groups, because also I spoke about it very openly, because I think we need to break down the taboos. And thankfully my son is fine, and he had the remorse and he's okay, but what I did is I reached out to my own personal network of psychologists and teachers whom I know actually in my own network to support and help him, but also support and help the school, because what we realised is with the homeschooling it was causing a lot of frustrations for him, because there was a wide gap between what he was getting as tasks and what he was actually capable of doing at home for homeschooling. So there was lots of different pressures which caused that frustration. And so now, thankfully, because I have a psychologist friend and teacher, and she's now going to be helping with the school. In fact, she's dealing with the school on our behalf as well, and we're working as a team together. So this brought me also to the topic of mental health in women. And so I'm doing later this week in some female groups an online chat about mental health and being very open and transparent about my situation. So it encourages other women to hopefully speak up and also be open about their challenges. Because as women, as we know, I mean, for example, even in the UK, we were hearing some statistics of the domestic violence that's gone up like 25%, and I don't know what the statistics are here, but I'm sure they're pretty high. And of course, so there's a lot that needs to be done there. And on the Women 100, which Julia will kindly speak about as well, Women 100 is a fantastic initiative that we launched last year, where it was bringing women together from different diverse backgrounds from all corners of Brussels. And we held an event last year at the Bourse at the end of March, and we wanted to celebrate, in fact, this year, the year's anniversary. Sadly, we couldn't do it, but we did a couple of online events. But also, as a result of those online events, we decided to do a social media campaign, which Julia can tell us a little about, Julia, because Julia's been helping W100 and has been amazing at coordinating this campaign.
Can I ask just one question before we go on to W100, which is both to Sarah and Rosina, do you think that this is a gap right now in Brussels, this kind of multilingual mental health services reaching different populations? Are there any initiatives that you see here? Or
don't see enough, I'm afraid, certainly not on the mental health aspect. The W100 campaign is a separate one to the mental health one, though. That's about showcasing women during this period of COVID who have been active in their community, who would not normally have a voice. And so it's showcasing and highlighting, in fact, the women through the social media campaign. Julia, you want to chat a little about it, of how it kind of came together briefly? Oh, we can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yes, I've been very lucky to join W100 1 year ago, and the idea when we gathered was to, in the context of the crisis, was to see what can we contribute as a network of women of such diverse backgrounds. And so the idea came up to basically showcase women that are involved in the crisis, be it as a volunteer at the personal level, or be it in their professional life, and to also put the spotlight on those women that are not usually in the spotlight. And so the ideas and now has been going on, the campaign has been launched at the beginning of the month. So we're publishing one portrait every day, and to share the stories of and to share messages also, and also of hope and solidarity, but also sometimes messages of protest, depending on the women, knowing that W100 is a non-partisan and apolitical movement, which is very important to stress. And I think the portrait has really been, the campaign has really been going under one of the core values of the movement, which is radical inclusion. So the portraits are covering, in terms of, there's geographic diversity. So we've had portraits from pretty much all the communes of Brussels by now. Radical inclusion as in origins and cultural diversity. So we've had women from the Roma community, the Chinese community, the Polish community, Turkish, Moroccan, and French, and linguistic-wise also there's been French and English and Dutch portraits. Not enough English portraits actually, so that's a call up to you as well to follow the campaign and maybe suggest some more possibilities. And then the last element of diversity is just the diversity of sectors and of types of engagement. So I really invite you to look at the portraits. There has been women getting involved in terms of computer literacy, of mask knitting, in the health sector, as street nurses, as doctors in the hospitals, or involved in human resources at the schools as special educators or as school mediators, promoting women entrepreneurship as well, fighting domestic violence, or being involved in the food chain as shop managers, web design, nutrition therapists. So the list is long. I'll make it short, but this is really just to give you an idea of the diversity of portraits that have been coming up. And the idea really of the campaign is to build bridges, which is really the motto of W100, to keep building bridges in those difficult times, and hopefully to be able to all meet together again as soon as this is possible. And maybe just 2 words on how we're doing this. It's really, at the beginning, it was really based on our own networks within W100. It's a huge network, so there's a huge basis there already. We've had some very key partner organizations as well through these women's organization where the cockpit of W100 used to meet when setting up the movement. And then we have a wonderful graphic designer as well, Kaja, who's part of the conference here as well, who's been basically doing the portraits once we've received the text and the photos. And yeah, and I think one of the major impacts, what's very moving to see, is the interaction around the campaign, because every portrait speaks to a specific audience and is then being shared within this audience, but that audience will have access to the portrait of the next day and will. It's really building bridges despite social distancing, physical distancing. And that's been, yeah, and I think we all can't wait to meet in real life, but in the meantime, it's already been a huge impact.
Can I ask how you guys are organizing yourselves now with the remote? Like, is it through Slack? Is it through WhatsApp? Like, how, because the initiative is fantastic. I'm just trying to understand how you're trying to do all this from a distance.
It's been Zooming. Sorry.
Yeah, I was listening to Zooming when we had our initial meetings, and then since COVID, obviously it's been the Zooming, and also we have a WhatsApp group. So I have one with the fellow cockpit or the steering committee, and then we have another one for this WhatsApp group for this crisis period of COVID. So we're always just through the WhatsApp messaging, etc. And then also through email, Julia, you're receiving a lot of the information through the WhatsApp and also through email as well, the texts and the photos of the women to profile.
Yep.
Cool. Well, there's another initiative that has gone beyond 100. It's gone to 80,000, and that is from another non-Belgian city councillor, Pietro de Mateus, who lives around the corner from me, but I don't see people now, right? So I haven't seen your work, but I want to congratulate you. And maybe you could say a bit about what the initiative is, and also any links that you're trying to make in Belgium or Brussels, since you kind of do all these levels.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Yes. All right. So thank you very much for the invitation. I think it's a great initiative that you put together today. Indeed. So I'm, as you know, city councillor here in Saint-Gilles, Brussels, which is the most international commune in Brussels, possibly one of the most international cities in the world. I think after Dubai. But during the crisis, at the beginning of the COVID crisis, I realized that there was so much of concrete solidarity going on at local level, but also at European level, with the doctors from Germany going to help in Spain, or Romanian doctors coming to help in Italy. But we couldn't see anything of this in the media. And then I got some requests from some people from different countries to translate and put together some informations. So I put together some infographics, and then I said, okay, where should I post them? And then basically, okay, so let's create a group where we can crowdsource good stories, concrete stories of solidarities across Europe. And that's basically how the group Youth Solidarity now started, and now we have 80,000 people. I have to say that Brussels and Belgium in general is very well represented. I think we have over 10,000 people who are from Belgium. The second biggest community, I think it's in Italy, and then Portugal, followed by Germany, France, Greece, and many other countries. So basically the idea now is with this platform to give it actually to you, also to associations, I created a regular room every morning, but at 10 o'clock, but can be also any other time, which is specific for NGOs to hang out and meet up, to organize local activities. The idea is basically to give a space for citizens and also organizations to get in touch and to develop this feeling of local but also European citizenship. So again, I'm here in the listening mode, and I'm happy to hear many different activities that can be organized. We started with a talk show, for instance, with the European talk show, maybe the first one, with citizens, actually doctors, with doctors from Portugal, Spain, Romania, and Italy. And the idea there was to say, look, we are citizens, European citizens, and actually many of those people that took part in this European were European from another country that were working in a third country, all in the European Union. So the Portuguese doctor was based in Brussels. The Spanish doctor was half Italian. There was a Hungarian doctor that was based in Italy. So there was so much of this already Europeanness in this conversation, which actually shows so much how Europeans are contributing to the daily life of other Europeans in their own cities. And I think we saw so much during the crisis how many different nationalities are helping here in Belgium, but also in other countries, in some service sectors that you don't expect, including doctors and nurses. So my conclusion on this, I think with the idea of this group of Youth Solidarity Now, the idea was to really give visibility to concrete examples of solidarity and show that de facto solidarity is already a core principle of the European Union, of the European project, but also it's already happening. Even if media don't talk about it, it is happening. And I think if we manage to give visibility to these good stories of Europeans helping one another, we are making a big step forward in reinforcing European solidarity and European democracy. And getting to know everybody, of course, in Europe facilitates also civic space in Europe.
So one concrete next potential action, as you said, is if someone wanted to connect with other solidarity initiatives in their country, city, or in others, they could contact you and you can arrange this room.
Yeah, so basically there's a big group, which is a group of 80,000 people. There's a smaller group that I created, which is for those who want to be more active. And in that smaller group, we are having brainstorming on how we can mobilize the group. And one of the ideas that came out was to have the ability to have conversations, for instance, per city. So now in the group, you can have different hours. You have a conversation in one language, for instance, or you can improve your language, whatever. So you get this ability to get to know another person through a useful thing. But also there is one dedicated hour, which is for city discussions. So technically, we could have this conversation that we are having now, for instance, if it is more about Brussels in the group, and then everybody would be able to engage with it and see what's going on, maybe join in, and then like this, you go out from the bubble. And then there is, of course, thematic discussions. So the idea that we can have a common conversations on issues such as politics, or sports, because sports also unites people. Culture. I just came out from another conversation with some people and organizations that want to develop cultural activities. So there is so much that actually we are experiencing together in this crisis. So many solutions which actually could be common. And I think the challenge is for organizations which are established to be able to reach out to the citizens who want to do something, but maybe they're not able or willing to dedicate too much. They want to contribute with maybe 1 hour a day or 1 hour a week. And I think we have to be able to bridge this gap of mobilization.
Okay, well, good. Then we might come back to you with possible next actions. We have one person who wanted to speak up. If you wanted to present something, write me in the chat because I just have to make sure we move on. But this is Petar, a friend of mine who's now at the European Citizen Action Service. So, Petar.
Thanks, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thanks to you, and thanks to everyone who spoke before me. Super interesting initiatives, and I'm very happy to share some of the things that ECAS is doing at the moment, and all of it evolves around mobile EU citizens. I'll start by saying that I've recently joined ECAS. Just before that, within the ECIT Foundation, I launched an ECI demanding full political rights for mobile EU citizens. And as a part of this ECI, we demand three things from the Commission. One, to include voting in national elections among the voting rights for mobile EU citizens, and a referenda as well. The other, to get rid of the existing obstacles to voting rights of mobile EU citizens in European and local elections. And thirdly, to fill the gaps in research which exist, which are significant and which should inform the future steps the EU takes in this direction. So free to check out this ECI. It's called Voters Without Borders. It's been officially registered by the Commission and is currently trying to garner campaigning partners and support before it launches the signature collection in September. But then I moved to ECAS, and we have a ton of very interesting projects I wanted to share with you. You might know ECAS because it's actually handling the Your Europe advice service, which gives answers and resolves dilemmas of all mobile EU citizens who don't know how to exercise their rights or are facing blocks in the exercise of their rights. Or you might have heard of it through the ECI forum. So it helps new campaigners and people who want to use the ECI learn this tool. What I'm in charge of ECAS is first the ECAS Awards. In November, if everything goes as planned, we're going to have the first edition of the ECAS Awards. And this award is specifically tailored for mobile EU citizens. Actually, it's called HOME, which is an acronym for Hosts Open to Mobile Europeans. So we want to give the award to municipalities or regions or NGOs who are linked to municipalities and regions which promote the life of mobile EU citizens. And there are four categories: either practices aimed at alleviating the effects of COVID, which obviously is an important thing, and for which the initiative like W100 or the Julia spoke about would be an ideal candidate, or practices aimed at improving the entry and residence rights of mobile EU citizens, or practices aiming at improving political rights, for which 1bru1vote would be an ideal candidate. And finally, practices aimed at improving social and cultural inclusion of mobile EU citizens. We have a financial prize, and the winners will also, in each of the category, will also get video. We'll get a meeting with the Commission because we want these best practices to be shared across the EU, and there are several other items to the prize. So please, I encourage you all to check out the link I will send in the chat after I finish speaking, and apply for the prize or promote the prize. It would be great if Pietro would share the prize on the Solidarity page on Facebook, which I fully support. The second thing that came up at ECAS is that at the beginning of the outbreak, I was shocked by something I didn't expect, and that was discrimination against mobile EU citizens from Italy or Germany or those 0 countries of the outbreak. And I also felt, as mobile EU citizen myself, that we are sometimes blocked in a double quarantine. So not only are we locked inside our homes, but we're also separated from our families and friends from the country of origin. And so what we finally managed to agree a few days ago is to get money for for a study on the impact of the COVID outbreak on mobile EU citizens' freedom of movement rights. And as a part of the research for this study, we are going to have 2 surveys, one to mobile EU citizens and the other to mobile EU citizens organizations. So I hope I can contact you guys via Tom to fill out this survey. And finally, and I finish here, we are also now getting a training from a professional campaigning incubator in order to tailor make a campaign which will sensitize the majority populations in several countries to mobile youth citizens of all shades and colors, so homeless mobile youth citizens to expats, not but just by saying, okay, we're so cool and you should accept us, but by looking at the specific characteristics of the middle audience or those conservative people that might not readily accept mobile youth citizens, and trying to reframe their frames and sort of get them to support mobility in Europe. So much for me. And I'll just send the link to the awards in the chat right now. Thanks, Tom.
No, but thanks, Petar. I mean, if ACAST is willing to support this kind of activism in Brussels, that would be really welcome. So I want to now hand it over to Philippe, who has joined us. You've been hearing about the different types of initiatives that non-Belgian Brusselaars have been doing in different ways in different places. But we wanted to also have this moment to stop and think about, you know, what is the significance of this current moment for our communities in Brussels and for creating a common life and future for this city, and what we as active citizens, social entrepreneurs, and all of this, you think need to be keyed into will be the major challenge for the decision makers in the region. And since you've always been an active supporter of 1bru1vote from the beginning, you know, now that we're thinking more strategically about what we should be doing over the next few years, we wanted your kind of keynote thoughts before we go over and hear from Omri about what our plans are for the future. So let me see if I need to unmute you. Yeah, it says that you are not connected to the audio. Yeah, it says that there's no audio connection. So what you can do, Philippe, maybe you can try and call in on the telephone number. If you go back to the link that you received, there was also a telephone number. I think that's probably the easiest way for us to hear you. It's this 028937018. Okay, let's see if that works. Maybe while Philippe is calling in. Yeah, well, Philippe is calling in. We also wanted Olivia to give us the celebration part. So maybe we can do that now, Olivia, rather than before. So I don't know if you can share your screen.
Yeah. Coming up. Okay. I hope this is visible for everybody because I'm new here.
Yeah.
Do you see do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so everybody, this is a 1 year anniversary date, and 1 year since the last elections, the regional elections, which unfortunately still 1/3 of the Brussels population did not have a voting right. And so we would just like to touch upon our achievements since the beginning of the campaign, and then stop to reflect on what are the next steps, which is also what Omri will be talking about later. So 1bru1vote, for maybe a few new introducers to 1bru1vote. We had a twofold strategy from the start. We wanted to build on the support from Brussels citizens to carry the message of the need to reform voting rights, and also gain support from local politicians, and particularly at the commune level, because as you may know, the local politicians are also present at the regional level. So if you build a local base, then you can definitely relay that message to the regional level, and also use the local democratic process to be able to put forward that message into concrete motions, and then move it up one level. So we had three main components to our strategy, and building one on the citizen forces, and then the second, the political forces. So in 2018 February, we launched the 1bru1vote initiative at a first town hall meeting in Flagey. We also had the first 150 signatories from a wide range of professionals, from journalism to media to politics to philosophers and researchers. And then we also had a lot of media coverage. And it was the start of the petition to gain 5,000 signatures, because at the same time, the Brussels government had introduced the petition rights for its residents, and up to date, no initiative had ever been presented at the Brussels Parliament. So yes, we had quite a lot of ambition, and still do. Then spring and summer 2018, we had also in parallel with Vote Brussels, we took steps to also increase voter registrations for the local elections, because we really wanted to work on raising the profile of EU and non-Belgians in Brussels to vote for the local elections. And in parallel, we had our citizen interpellations in a majority of Brussels communes, with the 1,000 Brussels commune definitely setting a good example for the others as well, where we saw like a lot of like domino effects. Like once we had a few communes votes, motions in favor of the 1bru1vote, we saw that kind of caught a good it then promoted our positive message. I don't know if you still hear me. And okay, because I just heard a little sound in the background of maybe something went off. But then in October we had the local elections. We saw that there was the highest increase in voter participation and a number of EU citizen candidates for the first time. So that was definitely a positive thought. Then in November, we had our second town hall meeting in Ginetba, where we touched base with our supporters and also a wide range of EU citizen candidates and also elected politicians, to see where we would strategize for the upcoming regional elections. So in January of last year, we also made it to the Brussels Parliament and the Commission for Finance and General Affairs, where we first had our public audition on the question of voting rights for non-Belgian citizens, and we were asked, we had an exchange of views with the parliamentarians, and that was a first for us, and I think for any citizen group, to really let parliamentarians hear about this issue, as it isn't a new issue, but it was definitely the first time that citizens were actually heard in the chambers of the political institutions of Brussels. Also, we definitely got in also another positive nomination, which was the Brussels of the Year. We were nominated in the local action category, so that we see all of us on stage in Flagey. It was definitely a nice celebration to all that had passed. And in March, the resolution coming forth from our intervention in January was voted by the Brussels Parliament on extending voting rights. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be in place, but it definitely sets the political scene to make work of researching the question, like through different avenues, constitutional reform, one of them, to make sure that this is going to be work for the future of the current legislature, because that was right before the elections, as you can see. Then before the elections, we also had a Twitter Blitz campaign to get Article 8 on the list of constitutional articles eligible for change. So Article 8 speaks of the voting rights and who is allowed to vote. But this did not make the final cut. And then come May, we had no voting rights, but we were obviously very alive and kicking. And we still continue our efforts. So as of now, we have new additions to the team. We are planning new events and strategies for 2020. And we would like to highlight that the main premise of our action is that the international community in Brussels has a lot of expertise, goodwill, and resources to contribute to the future of the Brussels region. So I think this is also a nice bridge to what Omri will present to us, but also I think how we can talk about how we can contribute to the future of the Brussels political life, and through our initiatives also building stronger citizen engagements for the future. So if you haven't found us yet, you can definitely find us on social media. Voilà.
Thank you, Olivia. So this is where we are. With the Brussels government, most parties supported the resolution, where we have Pascal Smet's office that is supposed to create a Europe-Brussels forum and reach out and restructure the position of the Brussels Commissioner for Europe that is temporarily in limbo. We have also the Brussels government that's committed to doing more reach out to ordinary citizens through citizens panels, although whether that'll include people of all nationalities has actually not been a specific criteria for inclusion. But we have generally specific contacts who are interested in how they can better reach out to non-Belgians. So there are a lot of things that we can do, but we also have the current reality today. So I think we have Philippe on the phone with us.
Yeah, can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. All right. So here we are.
Okay. Well, so
and we want your vision for the future.
Okay. So I apologize for the mishaps, and I'll also get the sound here out of the way because otherwise I hear my voice twice. Okay. So yes, thank you very much for the invitation. Sorry, I appeared and disappeared because of some technical problems, which I tried to get myself clarified about later. So that was a big question you were asking me. I'll just answer it from one particular angle, which has already been touched upon earlier, which is language. And so linguistic diversity, which is massive in Brussels, is a calamity if it's not accompanied by multilingualism. But massive linguistic diversity is a fantastic asset for a city if it can be coupled with widely spread multilingualism. And because if you have linguistic diversity without multilingualism, you have lots of people who are just stuck within their own group, and with very little contact across groups, so little cooperation, little trust between groups, little solidarity between groups. But if you have multilingualism, widespread multilingualism, it's fantastic. It's fantastic for the people, it's fantastic for the city, and it's also fantastic for the countries of origin, or the regions of origin of these various people, of the people who make up this extremely diverse Brussels population. And so with this conviction, we started in 2013 something called the Marnix Plan for Multilingual Brussels, where the central objective was trilingualism plus. That means trying to get all the people who are permanently settled in Brussels, in particular, of course, the people growing up in Brussels, the young people, getting them trilingual French, Dutch, English, the three languages that are particularly important to learn in Brussels for different reasons for each of them, but trilingualism plus, because at the same time we must encourage the transmission of the countless languages that native tongues that are present in Brussels. So we started that in 2013, and so partly to our surprise, but not completely to our surprise, we saw that more than ever the current Brussels government took that objective to heart, and even created a ministry for the promotion of multilingualism. So probably for the first time anywhere in the world, we have a minister for multilingualism. So it's, as many of you will know, someone called Sven Gatz, who is also our finance minister. Many worries in that capacity for the moment. And he prepared then a note, beleidsnota, not the politique, which was approved unanimously by the Brussels Parliament 3 or 4 months ago. And it will really be launched in September, hopefully in real life, not in digital fashion, on the day, the annual Day of Languages on the 26th of September. Now, what about the crisis in all that? The crisis is a terrible thing for this sort of project for 2 reasons. One is that during the period of lockdown, of course, the extent to which people communicate, interact with other people who don't speak their own language is massively reduced, because it's in the work context when you go out to work more than when you telework. It's of course by mixing randomly in the streets and in the squares, through meetings of all sorts of associations, that you practice languages which are not your own mother tongue, and it's by practicing that you maintain it and that you develop it. Also, of course, the learning of languages in creches, in primary schools, in kindergartens, at all levels, was massively reduced during the period of lockdown, and will still be slower than usual in the coming weeks, if not months. So that's one reason why the crisis is not good for that project. And the second reason is that there will be, although we don't feel it yet, but there will be a massive pressure on financial resources. As you know, you can imagine, so there are 3 very big blocks in public expenditure. There are the pensions, which are the main block. There is healthcare, which is the second block, and the third one is education. Of course, among the 3 forms of expenditure, the one that's most useful for the learning of languages is the third one. And given that we won't be in a context in which there will be, with scarcer resources, there won't be much enthusiasm for reducing the amount of money spent on healthcare, given the circumstances, there is likely to be a significant pressure on what can be spent on education, and certainly there won't be an increase in the amount of resources available for education. So that means that because of the crisis, we are facing a particular challenge, just at the moment that we try to amplify the action in that dimension, and partly because of the sort of paralysis of language learning implied or created, caused by the lockdown, and in part because of the pressure there will be on resources for education. That means that organizations, associations, networks like yours will be of particular importance. Why? Well, first of all, because the learning of languages is something that you don't do mainly by learning grammar rules and lists of vocabulary, but practicing it. And so it's crucial to mobilize, going back to what I said at the very beginning, to mobilize the tremendous linguistic diversity present in Brussels, and indeed illustrated by the people around our virtual table now, to mobilize that for spreading the knowledge of languages to people who need it, and who otherwise wouldn't get it because of the poverty of the educational system in its ability to teach them languages in an efficient way, and also because they don't spontaneously come into contact with people that would speak different languages. So there is this diversity that is present thanks to the international nature of Brussels. And there are people who are clever in finding good ways, efficient ways of spreading these competences. People who have the right sort of goodwill, some of them the right sort of availability among young pensioners, for example, who would be able to volunteer and do something about that. So I won't say more, but it's just a sort of we'll be getting out of the lockdown gradually, so there will be a new council for multilingualism that will be set up, also officially inaugurated in September, and then a new dynamics, a stronger dynamics than before, must be created, and there are no doubt all sorts of synergies that can be created and must be used, must be mobilized with a number of associations, networks, initiatives with which several of you are involved. So that's what I wanted to throw in by way of food for thought, and I put my, so I can hear you. Okay.
Thank you, friend. You are one of these people who see the value of the international nature of Brussels as the most cosmopolitan city in the democratic world, and I think that we have to get the Brussels political elite to realize this as well, so that they don't think of this as just some kind of luxury project, but as a healthier city, a more inclusive city, is also a more democratic city. And your points on the multilingualism make me realize, that the Europe used to come to Brussels on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. We had all of these people coming. We welcomed Europe, we welcomed the world, and that's not happening anymore. And I realize now that actually Brussels doesn't really serve Europe and serve the world, because while we're happy for people to come here and do their little things in a corner, actually, if we could take more advantage of our multilingual capacity as a city, as an economy, we would also be much more resilient to face these points of lockdown. So I think, if you can work with us to try and change this mentality in Brussels, politicians who are very open to us but don't see the concrete benefits, I think there's a lot we can do together. But we also wanted to turn to our own resident philosopher in 1bru1vote, Bertrand Vert, because I think that you could also give us some ideas about what we as non-Belgian activists need to be thinking about, either self-critically or also more positively. And you've been thinking a little bit about what we as 1bru1vote as individuals can do. So can you also give us your vision?
Yes.
Thank you, Thomas. Hello, everybody. Philip, go ahead.
Okay. I'll go with the.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So, well. So obviously, I fully agree with you about the importance of having in Brussels, really realizing that Brussels is not a Belgian affair. In fact, as time goes by, I think Wallonia and Flanders are more and more alike in terms of the composition of their population, but Brussels is increasingly different from both Flanders and Wallonia. So, as you know, with now over 2/3 of the population of Brussels that is consists either of foreign citizens or of Belgians of recent foreign origin. And so Brussels has become completely different from Flanders and Wallonia from what Brussels was in the 20th century. So that it's very important to develop a sort of inclusive conception of what it means to be a Brusseler. So that wherever people come from, whatever their mother tongue, whatever the color of their skin, they must feel fully Brussels. That means with all the rights and all the duties that are associated with being a full citizen of the city. And this emphasis, and that's why the thing about the importance given by the current Brussels government more than ever to multilingualism, multilingual aspect of Brussels, not the bilingual aspect of Brussels, the multilingual aspect of Brussels is very important, not only for the sort of pragmatic reasons I mentioned before, but also for symbolic reasons, for what it means to be a Brusseler. And it said explicitly in the note by the minister, multilingualism is a central part of the identity of Brussels and of Brussels today. And that means that this inclusiveness is very important. And so I think, therefore, and particularly as you know, I supported fully and I will keep supporting the demand for an extension of voting rights at the regional level to all citizens or citizens of Brussels, whether Belgian or not. But of course, this will be helped, and the more people who are not Belgian citizens and have no intention to become a Belgian citizen, the more they are involved in the active life of the city by contributing to the life of the city, the stronger their bargaining position will be when this issue of political citizenship will come up again, and it will. So that's why I don't think it's a place to discuss specific ways in which the international community of people active, willing to contributing also in all sorts of ways to the community, what people could do in this linguistic dimension. Because beyond the linguistic dimension, there is always more than language that is involved. But it's certainly one area in which a call must be made to imagination, and so think related to your own networks, to your own past experience, the ways in which these synergies could be mobilized.
Definitely. Well, this is what we want to do in the future. Bertrand.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Thomas. Actually, I had some technical problems, so I had difficulties to follow some of the presentations. And very modestly, if I can share my short views on the current crisis and potential effect on the, let's say, the diverse Brussels that we are, and particularly the non-Belgian community, if we can call it like this. First, I have a certain bias indeed, since once I start to talk about the community and society here in Brussels since I'm elected. So I'm an Ecolo councillor here in Excel since already 2 legislatures or two rounds, and so I just want to first share a personal impression, which is personal and which is biased and which is only my little view, is to say that I'm a bit concerned, I'm a bit touched by the fact that I don't feel that much that local authorities, even in my own commune or at regional level, have been that much addressing to the diversity in Brussels. We have been working for, we certainly have been working for homeless people, but also for non-registered people or les sans-papiers. We had some initiative on that. We have several motions in the different communes around Brussels. But once we put this population, the one that is most in the greatest difficulties, and certainly the most severely touched by the current crisis at different level, sanitary, economical, social. The other non-Belgians, such as most of us we are, I didn't see that much messages going in the direction of actually. And as one of the speakers was mentioning earlier, Peter from ECAS, precisely having this kind of double lockdown, being locked here, but also not having the possibility to see any of our direct relatives, parents, in our own countries, particularly around Europe. Yeah, there is a certain specificity, and even myself in my own commune, I've been trying to push a little bit the colleagues to be more vocal on that, and so far I didn't see much reactions. Indeed, I can take some initiatives, and I will certainly. But yeah, I wanted to share this opinion. Also at regional level, I didn't see much of messages, at least messages addressed to the non-Belgian people, being again locked down here in Brussels. Okay, this said, I just wanted also to share a few 4 or 5 points on what I tried to write down. First, I wanted to put forward the idea that we can postulate that the crisis is pushing people to be more than ever self-centered in a certain way. So here I'm going totally against the idea of having more solidarities around. And why I'm saying this, because we can also see that individuals have been totally absorbed to a certain extent by the lethal effect of the pandemic, or by the direct threat of the pandemic. A perception that has been supported also by the media. So basically, being threatened or being scared of what is happening, and so we can also say that much people have been switched on the survival modes, kind of, and just wishing to take care of themselves. And this we can definitely understand. So here there is a certain paradox between this. And also these people being switched off of taking care of what is happening around them. There is also perhaps another perception, is that the only windows that they had through the world or outside of their own consideration were perhaps their direct relatives, the family. So it was the direct or the unique link, in a sense, to the outside. It was to take care about their families, and in the non-Belgian people, families living abroad. So it's one thing that I wanted to put forward. Actually, I quite like the words of Didier Fassin, anthropologist, and which is a professor at Princeton University, that recently wrote in an article in Le Monde that I can recommend. That he was basically stressing this, saying that we are only interested in what is happening on the planet that speaks to us about coronavirus. That is about us. The entire economy of our attention is being absorbed. This is remarkable paradox at a time when a global phenomenon is affecting the entire planet. Our view of the world has shrunk as never before. We have become myopic. So I think this is quite interesting. Meanwhile, I mean, there are indeed these actions, and there are some contradictions on the way we behave, the way we perceive the outside. Also, another point is the perception of the location. I think we can presume that to a certain extent people tend to be more grounded, particularly in our community of being non-Belgian, being used to travel, being used to go to see the family precisely outside Belgium, outside Brussels. In a certain way, this crisis imposed the fact to be locked down, to stay where we were, and to a certain extent, we could postulate that it forced people to get more grounded. Also, it forced people to be more aware of what is happening in your direct community. I mean, we all lived this experience of you only had the chance to walk on your street, no further. So obviously you were forced to get to know a bit more your neighbors, your direct neighbors. Also, you had to take care of what was happening in your community, because you wanted to know, in case I fall sick, what should I do? I should go in Brussels to Saint-Pierre. So where is Saint-Pierre? What is Saint-Pierre Hospital? Oh, I didn't know this hospital, actually. And so to a certain extent, so still we were forced to follow more the local medias. So Sarah was talking about media's relations and your current status in your magazine, but I think, I mean, this has to be indeed studied and checked, but I think to some extent people had to follow more French-speaking or Dutch-speaking, or in your case English-speaking medias to be aware of what is happening around. Another thing is that having more this grounded, this relation to the local, to the community, is also one phenomenon we could study. Is also how many people actually get registered to follow this BE alert news, so mostly via emails. I'm working in international environment for the Commission, and so a lot of colleagues get registered and wanted to have this news directly from the government. So here there is also this in the more grounded, is that the crisis forced us to follow more also the Belgian actuality and the Belgian institutions. We can also postulate that it forced or helped or supports people to be more aware of how this is working. Actually, whom are producing the mask that I need? Is it the commune? Is it the region, or the federal has to do something here? So to a certain way, also perhaps its support pushed people to be more aware of that. And I will finish by saying what, it's again the relation with the topos, the location, that I think is quite interesting to be more studied, to be more envisaged, and to understand. Because in a certain way we were kind of forced to be to trust the authorities. I mean, otherwise it might have been very painful for people that were totally distrusting the regional or federal authority here in Belgium, because people might have been very scared actually. So I don't know, the relation to trust, did it help people to trust better Belgian authorities? We could postulate that, yes, but we need to study perhaps. And a last point, it's about it goes back to this question of the borders. So here I don't have answers or certainties, but indeed with this lockdown, for us cosmopolitan people, it's very painful, and also we can feel that perhaps some other people that don't think like us, the ones that are supporting the idea of having strong borders, of excluding people from one community to the other due to these borders, I mean, conservative and xenophobic people, nationalistic people, indeed, they were perhaps happy in a sense to see that, the answer to this dangerous world outside to globalization is to close the borders, and look, we can treat, or we can find an answer to this crisis in closing the borders. This is good. But to the contrary, we obviously see that closing borders has a massive effect on first economy, obviously. It stops everything with huge consequences, and secondly, on the human point of view. In a community like Brussels, indeed one of the most international community in the world, obviously it has a huge, big effect on human relations, and for us, the ones having families and friends abroad. So I think here, perhaps at the end of the day, this crisis will help us to convince and to make people aware of the importance of having open communities and perhaps less borders, at least at European level. Okay, these were my 5 cents. Sorry, I've been long, but I wanted to share that.
No, but I think you're right that the way that all of us are thinking about our own citizenship is changing, but we don't necessarily know how to engage that citizenship and who we are engaging with in our communes, in the region. And it's easy then to just focus in on all of our specialties and expertise and families. So how can the region actually connect us with each other when the region actually does embrace the diversity of Brussels, but maybe doesn't have a lot of models, as Philippe was saying, from Flanders or Wallonia that don't really understand what are the advantages of this cosmopolitanism and the challenges of being a mega city. So Omri is actually at the moment studying a program at Harvard on community organizing. And so he wanted to come back to 1bru1vote as an example and a model, and has been trying to help us get some more specific strategic goals, given that we actually don't need to raise awareness about this issue. Actually, most political, the main democratic parties in Brussels support us, but they don't necessarily know what to do. So in the interest of time, I wanted Omri to give you his main ideas and give you then a chance to give him feedback on what you agree with or don't agree with. But also, this is the moment to exchange and get your own perspective across. So over to you, Omri, who made all of this possible.
Hi, Thomas. Hello, everyone. I think, I mean, thank you for the grand introduction, but I think that the ideas I wanted to talk about were the things that we all discussed together. So, I mean, the idea is really to explain, you know, what the discussions that we have had have been, and obviously without the fantastic experience and track record that 1bru1vote already had, none of this would be possible, of course. Just to say a little bit of something about community organizing and the Harvard course which you mentioned. Essentially, this is a course and an approach, colloquially called community organizing, which comes from the tradition of the civil rights movement in the US. Which was basically brought to the Harvard Kennedy School by a professor called Marshall Ganz and systematized there. And then it gained fame and popularity as being the technique that enabled the Barack Obama campaign in 2008 and 12, and then the Bernie Sanders campaigns, and a lot of the main Democratic campaigns that you saw, also Elizabeth Warren and others, have used this. And so that's the reference point there, and that was kind of my trigger point to go, okay, let's maybe try and apply this at the local level where I live, where we all live, and get involved with 1bru1vote, which I kind of started getting more involved with through Thomas, through Olivia, and the others. And so essentially we started having a discussion, and this is, where we're getting from the introduction to the meat. We started having a discussion several months back saying, if we want to create change, and if we want to, mobilize and organize people to create the power that we need to affect the change that we want to see in the world, that's sort of the equation of community organizing. What do we need to do? What is our theory of change? What is that difference that we need to make in the world, that impact we need to have to achieve the goal that we've set out for ourselves? Now, on the face of it, our goal is very ambitious. We want all non-Belgian residents of the region of Brussels to be able to vote in regional elections. And to really achieve that, if we go to the end goal of, let's say, what we want to see in the 2024 election, that would be, would require a change of the Belgian constitution, a change of legislation, a very major political shift in Belgian politics. So then we need to reverse engineer that and go back and say, okay, what are the resources that we need to mobilize to do that? And then, of course, there are all of these bigger discussions and bigger debates that are brought into this. What is Belgian constitutional reforms, and how would that process happen, and what will it include apart from just, non-Belgians voting? There's a whole set of issues there about citizen participation. Then what about the EU? What about Brussels as the capital of Europe? Should that be enshrined somewhere in there? So we started going through this wide-ranging debate or discussion that was very fruitful and interesting, and I learned a lot from it personally. And I think it essentially boiled down to 3 different levels. Now, we said, if we want to achieve that high-level change in the long run, we need to be able to gain support at the federal level in Belgium, politically speaking, because that's where that change is eventually going to come from. And that's very challenging because, the disparity between Flanders, Brussels, Wallonia, and so on, the political landscape is very challenging. But it's a long-term perspective. Then in the region, like Thomas said, we have a lot of friendly faces and voices, and there is a close relationship between the communal level, the local level, the regional level, and the federal level, where we need to activate citizens at every point to have a knock-on effect effect between one and the other. So we started talking about how we reactivate the network of organizers that we have, how we activate people to start doing the activity at the different communes and interpellation citoyen and so on, and how we reactivate our connections with the region, and how we might then later on get a political statement from our allies in the federal parliament as well, and so on. And then what happened was that the COVID crisis hit, and we went into lockdown, and we started to discuss, other elements. What do we do now, basically? And so the discussion shifted quite a bit, because we were aware that we were now in a different reality. But in a sense, that reality required from us to use and to acknowledge a very powerful tool, which is storytelling. And here we really drew inspiration from what W100 was doing and the suffragette movement historically, of being able to show the reality of the different non-Belgian citizens here in Brussels, whether it's refugees and asylum seekers or immigrants of different walks of life, or whether it's people who are normally referred to as expats, even though that's a terrible name for anything. But all these different demographics of people have a shared experience with their fellow Belgians and with their fellow communities here, and all of them make a contribution, and all of them have an experience that we want to talk about and to share. And the community organizing approach definitely emphasizes also this storytelling element of the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now, and highlighting that creation of a public narrative together. And basically, building on that suffragette experience, from 100 years ago, we see that once you create a powerful illustration of the contribution that a certain group makes to society, as was the experience of women working in World War I, which was then leveraged to say, well, women have worked, now they need to vote, which was the narrative at the time. Now we can basically show the real life experience of non-Belgians in Brussels and say, these people matter, these people exist, these people deserve to participate in these communities, and to also tie this into the different questions about Belgian identity, about multilingualism, about European identity that are so important. And so this is where our conversation has ended up. And what we want to do, and this is up for discussion within the group, it's not me saying that, it's to really tell the stories and to show a collage, inspired by what W100 has been doing. So it's great to have that exchange, to show that experience, to show that human story, and to be able to connect what we're doing with 1bru1vote to a more inclusive Brussels overall, that emerges from the crisis healthier, better connected, more integrated, and a fairer place to live as well. So I think this is, without taking too much time, just this is the perspective that we're coming at, but it's really something that we should discuss together. Far be it for me to say, that's for us.
As Omri said, you don't have to criticize him, you can criticize all of us, that's fine. But we wanted any initial feedback. Does this, do you find this inspiring? Do you find it confusing? Do you think that we should be focusing on different levels right now to try and increase the democratic opportunities for non-Belgians? What's your feedback? Rosina?
Yeah, I think it's really positive what you're saying there, Omri, and I think it's a bit like, and thank you for obviously the positive feedback on the W100 campaign, but I think it even goes deeper than that. I think it's even like humans of Brussels. I think it's about people, all walks of life of people, and it's fantastic what we're doing of obviously highlighting the case of women, but I think it's about everybody. I think if we're talking also, I mean, we're talking radical inclusion for the women, but I think if, with what you're saying with regards to the international community, we need radical inclusion there at all different levels, and that includes men as well. So obviously, and so I think it is kind of creating this narrative, a new narrative for Brussels. If we look 10 years ahead, we're supposed to be the European capital of culture, and it's exactly this that we need to focus on. It's the culture, it's all these different elements, as you say, of the identity, the culture, the storytelling, and I think the narrative is so important because everyone's got a narrative to share, and I think it's about getting that out there. And I think it's also looking at what is our shared vision of Brussels looking forward. What is that narrative? Maybe we all have a different, we all have our different perspectives, but it would be interesting exercise to get some people together and see what is that image that we have in our head of the future of what we want to see for Brussels, and how, and then as you say, working back to say, okay, what are the pulls, what are the pushes, what are the trends that are happening, and what are the things that are out of our control, like the pandemic, and how do we bring all of that together? And I think a big part of that is, as I said, it's about a new narrative for Brussels. We need to have a new narrative, and yeah, and I think we're all part of that story. Also, as well as the international community, it's also the couples, like I know, where it's the, I mean, I'm married to a local Belgian who's, from Merricktown out in Flanders. And so it's also that international aspect of the locals that are married to international people. So there's so many different levels, actually. And I think that's what we need to look at. What does it actually mean if you're international? It can also be the locals. I know, I've worked when I was in corporate life working with fantastic Belgians that had an international point of view and that were very open-minded, and they would sometimes come into the groups where it was international groups because they felt a connection there. So I think we really need to think about what that means, about what international means and what the new narrative is for Belgium, for Brussels.
Julia, you wanted to add something? So go ahead and unmute yourself, Julia, and then Petar, yeah. So first, Julia, go ahead. I can't hear you, Julia. It's muted. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to add something based on both the experience of W100 and then some previous work experience, I think what's really important is to identify key partners. And someone mentioned earlier the undocumented migrants, for example. There's a huge campaign going on right now to advocate on behalf of their regularization. So I think this would be right now a huge campaign to support, and also, with voting rights coming next as a next step, basically, once they are regularized. And I think in terms of multilingualism, some of the portraits that we've highlighted in the campaign were intercultural mediators. So there was a mediator for the Chinese community, one of the Pakistani community, one of the Roma community. Those are really key people. So in terms of partnerships, I think it's both identifying other movements that are advocating for civil rights, that basically join in with voting rights, and identifying partners that are, such as intercultural mediators that can help reach out to a community based on multilingualism. And I think what's really important, and I think it's something I see in quite a lot of movements that I'm involved in, unless a few exceptions, most of the time the steering committees are either entirely or majoritarily white. And I think it's very important to have to identify people that can actually bring in other voices, so that they're not just narratives that are being shared, but that they actually have a proper seat at the table where they can pass on or represent their experiences. And I think that's one of the big challenges. And yeah, but so really, yeah, that was, so identifying partners, key people, and opening up the steering committees, let's say,
put it that way.
Yeah, that's, I mean, the group you mentioned on the sans-papiers, les victimes de la régularisation 2009, could teach us actually a lot about different tactics. And they've also been trying ours with citizens interpellation, which are not possible under this current. So if you have contacts with them, let us know. And we'll also need to talk more with you from W100 about how you handle language, because we've been a very English-speaking group. And we might need to think about how we can open up a bit there. Petar, you wanted to add something. Go ahead, Petar.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for what must be the most meaningful conference call I've had during lockdown. I've written so many notes from what Philippe and Bertrand said, and Omri, I'm so happy to virtually meet you, because for the last 2 months I've been super immersed in this campaign creation, which is completely based on the narrative change approach to campaigning of Marshall Gantz. And so in that respect, I want to tell you not to disregard the European level. Thomas asked me in anticipation of this call to just say a few words about what's next on voting and political rights at the European level. So the crisis has maybe reshuffled a bit the schedule, but the overall aim is that the Commission is supposed to come out with a new communication about the Citizens Directive by the end of the year, which might be postponed to the beginning of next year. And the Commission is also supposed to issue the European Citizenship Report, which is a triennial report on the state of EU citizens' rights. And both of these are supposed to have recommendations on where to go next. So it's super important to campaign in Belgium, but according to the research we've done at HICAS, it's also very important to have national campaigns not only in Belgium because of the specificity of Brussels, but also in France and Germany, because those will be the deciding votes in the Council. Hello there. Those will be the deciding votes in the Council on whether the communication and the citizenship report will be conservative and just say, okay, let's stick to the status quo, or if they will be more radical in terms of what kind of rights they will suggest. So I hope this isn't a one-off thing. Hello, and I really genuinely am looking forward to cooperating with you guys in the future.
Well, I mean, I think that you can help us link up with the European level, and also Catherine Sontag from Switzerland has been linking us up with other voting rights initiatives in other European countries where we could learn together and be linked up. So that's welcome. A number of you are telling me that you need to go, and we are a bit over. Can I propose that, I mean, this was a big event and big fun, but we need to, again, turning to Omri, but you know, the whole group, think about how we can do more things like this, maybe from your experience from W100, Zoom calls, more regular, more chances for people to come in. And if from this call, again, you have any practical suggestions, links, specific points, you can send them by email to the 1bru1vote at Gmail, and we'll come back in touch. Anyone want to say a last word? No?
Thank you for organizing.
Well, it was our pleasure.
Yeah, Thomas, I think we didn't.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think we didn't thank you enough, because you've been a real engine. So thank you, Thomas, and thank you everyone else who organized this. So
well,
big shout out.
If it weren't for 1bru1vote, I would not have actually been able to meet all of these active non-Belgian social entrepreneurs, activists, ordinary citizens. And when I've met people in the Brussels region, I try to tell them all about you. And I actually think this, as you say, we need to think about this narrative, because I think connecting a lot of the people who are here in Belgium to our decision makers, I think we could have a real cultural change in this city. So hopefully we can do something together. All right, everyone, make sure you celebrate, support some local brasseries if you can. And I look forward to another Zoom call or at some point a physical celebration.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.